Hey guys, before this video starts, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. It lets me know how you all feel about the video and helps me keep making content. Thank you guys, and let's get into it. Jingle All the Way is a 1996 Christmas movie directed by Brian Levant and produced by Chris Columbus, the same guy who did Scoob, Harry Potter, Mrs. Doubtfire, and apparently he's working on Gremlins 3 right now. The cast is an all-star collection of 20th century legends, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jake Lloyd, aka Young Anakin, Rita Wilson, aka Tom Hanks' wife, and three main antagonists, Robert Conrad, Phil Hartman, and the most villainous of them all, Sinbad. It follows a workaholic father, Howard Langston, as he attempts to buy a Turbo Man action figure for his son Jamie on Christmas Eve. The only problem is that Turbo Man action figures are sold out pretty much everywhere, and everybody, including Howard, is willing to do some pretty questionable things to get one. I just straight up don't understand the hate for this movie. I've heard it compared to some real atrocities like Christmas with the Cranks, and it has a whopping 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. This movie has amazing comedy, some of the best characters in Christmas movie history, and it's totally unique and really topical for the time, adapting real-life toy crazes like Tickle Me Elmo, the Cabbage Patch Kids, and the recent lack of Pokemon cards and the Zelda Loftwing Amiibo. Okay, I'm getting off track. It also tackles tough subjects like what it means to be a father and how to deal with your creepy neighbor. The entire movie is based off of Chris Columbus's own experience trying to get a Buzz Lightyear action figure for his son. All of that aside, I wholeheartedly believe that this movie is unrecognized, underappreciated, and underrated, and it helped to pioneer many tropes that we see in modern Christmas movies today. It also has some of the most uniquely hilarious moments that I've ever seen in any movie. I actually watch it every year out of tradition, just because I love it so much. I even have the Amazon exclusive Turbo Man Funko Pop. Look at this thing. It's Turbo Time! Two cool facts about this movie before we get into the nitty-gritty. This movie was released on November 22nd, 1996, but it actually premiered a week earlier in the Mall of America where a good chunk of the movie was filmed. The second fact is that if it weren't for the reboot of the Planet of the Apes movie, which was coincidentally produced by Chris Columbus and starred Arnold Schwarzenegger, this movie would have never been created. Cool? No? Okay, whatever. Also, just a disclaimer, I am reviewing the extended cut of this movie, not the theatrical release. Also, the next part of this video will be a summary of the plot, so just keep in mind there are spoilers ahead. Okay, let's get into it. This movie starts off with an amazing intro. Jamie is watching Turbo Man on TV, and the Turbo Man TV show is kind of designed after like the Power Rangers shows in the early 2000s and the late 90s. Jamie leaves to go take his purple belt karate test and expects Howard to be there, but Howard is too caught up in his work and ends up missing it. I like how this intro introduces us to pretty much every major character except for one, which I'll get into later. And it also sets the really cheesy but emotional tone. Howard arrives home to find Ted, his neighbor, on his roof.
Hey, neighbor!
Ted! What the hell are you doing on my roof?
Ted is also a really weird, creepy character. Again, we'll get more into him later. Howard discovers, after talking to Jamie, that he can make up his absence by getting Jamie
the Turbo Man action figure with the arms and legs that move, and the realistic voice activator that says 5 different phrases, including, "It's Turbo Time!"
I'd also like to address something that this movie does differently than most Christmas movies. The Langston family has money. Just look at their house, look at the way Howard treats cash. Keep this in mind as we go through the movie. This actually ties into one of the major themes, which again I'll get into later. I swear, every time I watch this movie, I love just the passive-aggressive dynamic between Howard and Ted. In one of the behind-the-scenes episodes of this movie, they actually talk about how Ted is designed to be more of like a thorn in Howard's side than an antagonist.
I got a Turbo Man for Johnny months ago. It's nestled safely under our tree.
So Howard is off to find a Turbo Man, where he runs into our last major character, Myron, played by Sinbad. I'd say he's the best character in this entire movie, but there are just so many good characters. Myron is after the same thing Howard is after.
Some like goofy butt toy, some fruity robot named Turtle Man.
It's Turbo Man.
Myron then goes on a big rant about toy cartels, which weirdly ties into my theory that all of these toy channels like Ryan's World are secretly in cahoots with the toy companies to sell more merchandise and brainwash kids. Whatever. Finally, Howard makes it into the store, but all of the Turbo Men are sold out. I hate these employees so much, which honestly makes it more satisfying when Arnold holds them up.
Where's your Christmas spirit?
Take that, Chris Parnell. The destruction of this store is really reminiscent of Elf. I think it's kind of gives off similar vibes and may have actually inspired them. I can't not confirm that at all, but I don't know. It's just funny to see stuff get destroyed. We come to find out that Myron actually is out for himself and betrays Howard to go get a Turbo Man for himself, but not before Howard takes a remote control car and drives it without seeing exactly where it is in the store. Whatever. I'm willing to suspend disbelief for this gag. Then Howard drops one of the most iconic lines.
Oh, poor baby.
The majority of the dialogue apparently between Sinbad and Arnold were improvised, and Sinbad was actually requested by Arnold's agent to play the character, who was originally supposed to be played by the one villain from Home Alone. I forget his name right now. But yeah, some of these dialogue lines are just so iconic, and it's just hilarious that they improvised it so well. And the shopping montage that follows is actually really well done too. So we find out that Ted is trying to make moves on Liz. Ted's acting like a total simp before he gget burned by the cookie sheet.
Pipe down in there!
Get what you deserve!
In this scene, we also get another iconic line.
Put that cookie down! Now!
This is one of those lines from a movie that I hear people quote all the time, but nobody seems to realize that it's from this movie. I'm telling you, this movie's a classic and people just don't know. Howard encounters Myron again, but not before he runs into the cop from the beginning of the movie's motorcycle with his car.
Officer, you broke my little mirror.
Now we're in the meat of the movie. Howard is traveling to the Mall of America. Howard gets another chance to get a Turbo Man doll if he wins a lottery, as long as he gets a bouncy ball. This is the point in the movie where I realized just how much Christmas music there is. They really jam-pack dozens of songs in here, and they really fit.
He got two! He got two!
Get the mailman! What? No!
Then Howard grabs the little girl's face.
I got it. Ow!
Then Jim Belushi shows up in this movie. And Danny Woodburn too? So Danny Woodburn and Jim Belushi can give Howard the hookup on a Turbo Man, but he has to go to their secret warehouse. So Howard finally gets a Turbo Man before finding out that it's the multilingual model.
It's fun and educational.
A giant fight breaks out between Howard and all of the Santas, and this is probably the most iconic scene in the entire movie. Also, Vern Troyer plays this Santa that gets punched across the entire room. Keep in mind, this is before he played Mini-Me in Austin Powers. Then there's a huge SWAT team raid. Then Howard uses quick thinking to get himself out of the situation by pretending to be a detective. He makes it out and calls home. This phone call between Howard and Jamie is actually really important. It takes the audience back to that real emotional feeling instead of just the whimsical comedy. Howard snaps on Jamie and attacks Turbo Man, which is one of Jamie's top role models, which really sets him off and allows him to vent about his feelings about how Howard hasn't been there for him. So Howard ends up in a diner that's sort of mocking a bar scene, and Myron's there, but then it actually is a bar scene because they end up drinking together. Then Myron starts talking about how his dad never got him a
Johnny 7 OMA one-man army gun. 7 guns in one.
and it's led to him being a neurotic and alcoholic mailman that he is today. This ends up scaring Howard about the future of Jamie in one of the most uniquely hilarious scenes I've ever seen in a movie.
Here's to you, Dad.
Howard and Myron are given another chance to get a Turbo Man by calling into a radio station for a contest. They end up just straight up going to the radio station and breaking in. I'd also like to take this moment to admire just how Arnold's physique is taken into consideration when writing the script. In any sort of instance where he's fighting somebody or doing something physical, he's very clearly up to the task.
Oh, I cannot live this for miles.
This is also really interesting considering that this role is the complete opposite of his usual government agent, spy, killer robot, or alien hunter. But it feels like it was just designed for him. Once they get to the radio station, Myron pulls the classic bomb gag where he pretends that a package that he's holding is a bomb, which ends up scaring Howard and the radio guy enough for him to get away. But not before the police come. But it's okay, Myron pulls the exact same gag on the police. But this time, when they get away, they realize that the bomb was actually a real bomb.
That was really a bomb? Just a sick world we're living in. Sick!
Howard arrives back home to find Ted putting a star on the tree, which is what Howard does every Christmas. This personal insult leads Howard to break into Ted's house to steal the Turbo Man from under his tree.
I can do this.
Before he can go back on his actions, the reindeer shows up, the whole house catches on fire, and Ted and Liz are completely aware of all of his antics.
Howard?
Then Howard straight up punches the deer in the face, and then he's drinking beers with him in the yard a couple minutes later. The true lesson of this movie is no matter how violent men get, they can always resolve their problems by drinking beer. Another thing that I want to point out is this movie could have so easily put in a fart joke with this reindeer. Like, it reminds me of Comet from the Santa Claus. They could have so easily made the reindeer some dopey, slapstick toilet humor character, but they didn't, and I just love that. I love how this movie uses smart comedy and does not take the easy way out. So Liz and Jamie head down to the parade and invite Howard, but don't expect him to really show up. Howard ends up making his way back, only to end up filling the role of Turbo Man on the Turbo Man float. This entire parade scene is just insane. First of all, the entire scene was put together in just over 2 months. That sounds like a long time, but not in reality when you think about how much preparation goes into a film. They had to design 4 parade floats, costumes for over 300 people, a literal marching band, the rights to every single one of the pop culture icons displayed on screen, and all of the dangerous stunts involved. Also, this was the only scene not shot in Minnesota. This was actually shot in Universal Studios, which probably explains how they were able to build all of their props so quickly. They were filming in over 100-degree weather. The water on Dementor's head actually started to boil in some parts.
Jamie!
He knows my name.
Howard finally understands the role that Turbo Man plays in Jamie's life, but then Dementor shows up, and surprise, surprise, it's Myron. He just beat the dude up and stole his costume. Also, Booster is here, and I think the guy who plays Booster is really funny. Myron attempts to take the Turbo Man that Turbo Man, aka Howard, gave to Jamie on the parade float. They actually end up on top of a building, and everybody just thinks it's part of a script. But then, Howard realizes that he can use the jetpack on the Turbo Man costume. I've always imagined that this is what Iron Man would look like if it was made in 1996. A lot of these special effects are really good, but in the extended cut, they kind of drag out the flying scene, which I think actually detracts from the movie. It's one of the things that I think was a good idea to not include. I think this movie is actually pretty realistic, with occasional suspending disbelief, especially with some of the characters' mannerisms, but this jetpack scene is just straight up not realistic at all. It kind of reminds me of the end of Kick-Ass, where he gets the secret weapon, which coincidentally is also a jetpack. So Howard rescues Jamie and reveals that he's the one behind the Turbo Man mask, which ends up taking care of the Ted problem. The police also take care of the Myron problem. Also, why is Liz so surprised at Arnold's physique? Seriously, he's already ripped and she knows it. Also, Robert Conrad tells Turbo Man that they could use a man like him on the Force, but then Howard reveals that it's actually him. So this is where the theatrical cut ends, but in the extended cut, it actually moves the post-credit scene before the credits, which I think is just a really, really, really good thing that they did. It was such a mistake to make this a post-credit scene in the original cut, because it just ties together all of the themes of family. It shows how Howard redeemed himself and how he's restored the relationship with his son and his wife. Does this movie have its flaws? Yeah, here and there. Does it deserve a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes? Absolutely not. I don't see how this movie is bad at all. The only logistical flaws with this movie are some cheesy dialogue choices and a few off-color jokes. If anything, it makes the dialogue more realistic. The timely and relevant subject matter in this movie is actually a reality for many parents, and the adult humor and situational comedy makes it really funny for adults to watch. And the slapstick comedy and the goofy characters also make it enjoyable for kids to watch. Seriously, put your kid in front of the Santa scene where Howard beats all of them up, and if your kid doesn't laugh, there's probably something wrong with them. This movie is a great family comedy that does not deserve the hate it gets, and I feel like it's so unrecognized in pop culture. It does have a cult following, but I honestly feel like this movie is slowly becoming a classic. I'd even argue that it stands up to movies like Christmas Vacation, Elf, and Home Alone. It has great messages about fatherhood and Christmas time, and it shows that even if your dad is wealthy and jacked, it still requires love and affection to keep those connections. In case you were wondering, we're not covering the sequel. It's terrible. Comment what you think of this movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it and then come back to this video and leave a comment. Don't forget to follow all of the socials, YouTube, Instagram, twitch.com/LukeWilsonTV. If you'd like to support the channel financially, consider buying merch. And if you're considering supporting the channel but you can't spare the money, then go subscribe. It's free, and I post a variety of content, so it's not like your feed's gonna be full of garbage. Thank you guys for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.